If you haven't been tracking Ronda Rousey, former UFC fighter, former champion, former pioneer, or still a pioneer, she's still alive, of UFC, of the women's division. They said it was never going to happen. Dana White said, there'll never be women fighting in the UFC. She did. She dominated for several years. You can argue she didn't fight the best, and while that's probably true, she didn't fight the best of the best at the time. She fought a lot of the best. And, you can't take that away from her. You can't take away, her 11 straight wins or whatever it was and title defenses in there. She eventually lost to Holly Holm, got kicked in the face, and then she lost again to Amanda Nunes. Now, if you're keeping track, she recently had said that she's still the best fighter of all time, not even female fighter, which she isn't. She's not the best female fighter of all time. She said she's the best fighter of all time, bar none. And she said that the only reason she lost was because she had concussions. She had so many concussions that she would get jabbed in practice and get concussed from that. So she was in no way, shape, or form to perform in her final two fights because of her concussions. We will be analyzing that in a moment. But Ronda, she's been on podcasts talking about this lately. Most recently, she was on Big Chris Cuomo. That's an unfortunate screenshot there of Chris Cuomo, but she was on Cuomo's podcast recently, which I guess is the Chris Cuomo Experience Project. I thought it was going to be Experiment Project, the Chris Cuomo Project. We love you, Chris, right? We do. Don't copyright strike this. But here she is saying more gobbledygook about how everyone turned their back on her.
As you're talking about what the reality was of what changed for you in your fight game, have you heard from any of your old friends? Have they, whether it's, a name like Rogan or just people who you thought were your friends that many people don't know, have people reached out to you and been like, I didn't know that. I wish I had known that. I would have never said that. Because nobody is correcting themselves. I haven't heard anybody, and it's not like I work for the UFC. I don't cover MMA, but I watch a lot of it. And nobody has changed their assessment of you. Not that you have a bad assessment. I mean, you're a legend of the fight games, no question about it.
Yeah, but MMA media hates me. It's fine. No, not a single person has called me or anything like that. They've all just doubled down and said that I'm making excuses or lying or blowing things out of proportion or not giving credit where it's due or, no, I have not. I'll be waiting for that call forever.
Are you waiting for it, though, or do you get it, and do you get where they're coming from and why?
I'm not waiting for it, and I get that they're a bunch of assholes. That's what I get. I get fuck you. But, at least I would rather not have those fake friendships in my life. I would rather that those people expose themselves and I don't, leave myself open to them. I would rather cleanse myself of all those, fake superficial relationships than have them still around.
Well, maybe it's because I know a little bit what it's like to be dragged.
We don't need to hear the rest from Chris Cuomo there. I think there's a little bit of another clip here about Ronda, specifically talking about Joe Rogan.
Still, people are like, so are you going to fight again? I'm like, dude, I'm done. I gave you enough. I gave you everything I had. I cut my heart out and I pulled it out and I spiked it on the canvas of the cage. And they're like, so you're going to fight again? They're like, no, I did everything I could. God.
Okay, maybe so not there. But what she did say about Joe Rogan is she said that she was pandering to everybody and doing things that other people would think is cool, but she didn't really enjoy the fame. I do not enjoy being paparazzi famous. I hate it. Now, in terms of her fame and the MMA media, let's see. She went up and she said, it was disappointing to see how happily everyone turned on me. People like Joe Rogan, who were crying in the ring out of the honor of being able to call my fights, people I considered friends in the media, so quickly turned on me. Now, Ronda Rousey is promoting a book. And Ronda Rousey is making the rounds on many shows. And good for her, right? We want her to make money. We want her to have a career post MMA, post wrestling. But the chickens have come home to roost now. The idea that Joe Rogan turned his back on you is not only far from the truth for just her specific situation, but the idea that Joe Rogan turned his back on somebody who he's praised like Ronda Rousey is so far from the truth, it's ridiculous. The MMA media did not specifically and does not specifically pick on Ronda Rousey. So Joe Rogan, who gets in the ring and says it's an honor to call your fights, there's no doubt in my mind that he's sincere. But Ronda Rousey coming out now and saying she's the best of all time, the entirety of MMA media is assholes. They just like to pick on me and say I'm making excuses. This isn't the case. While the MMA media may very well be assholes, a lot of them, not going to say all of them. There's many of them that I really like. There's many of them that I don't like. But the idea that they're picking on Ronda and saying that she's making excuses, she just can't handle any criticism, guys. This is what Ronda Rousey is. She was a great fighter who then, when she got too big to fail, they had nowhere else to put her. They had no one else to put her up against. She managed to avoid Cyborg Santos for so long. She managed to avoid even Gina Carano, who would have beat her. Gina Carano, in that era, came the closest to beating Cyborg Santos that anyone had ever come. Okay? Those two would have beaten Ronda Rousey. And then Holly Holm, who's a real kickboxer, a real fighter, who'd been knocked out in her own right a couple times. She got brutally knocked out in kickboxing, okay? She was undefeated in MMA, came and cleaned Ronda's clock because there was somebody that could actually block, or somebody that could actually box. Ronda Rousey couldn't box to save her life. She got to this point, just like so many champions do, where they go away for what makes them a champion. Khabib Nurmagomedov, amazing grappler, right? There was a period where he tried to box too much and he almost lost because of it, and then he went and dominated on the ground. This happens to champions. They get bored, they get a little complacent, they think they're better than they are at the things that didn't make them a champion. That's what happened to Ronda. She thought she could box with everyone now. She got her clock cleaned by Ronda, right? Concussed, whatever. Comes back a year later, gets absolutely destroyed by Amanda Nunes, who is the best female fighter of all time. That's the actual best female fighter of all time. But Ronda comes out and says she only lost because of her concussion. She was so concussed, even though her body was fine and her skills were fine. She even said that she was at the best she'd ever been, but she was so concussed that she lost. It's not true. It's just not true. She got beaten by better fighters. And to say that she was so concussed that, that's the only reason I stopped. Ronda Rousey, before her return fight against Amanda Nunes, she had already started working with the WWE. Now, say what you want about the WWE, predetermined match outcomes and everything. It's not exactly a concussion-free zone. It's not exactly a contact-free zone. And what did she do immediately after she lost to Amanda Nunes? Well, she went back into wrestling full-time. She had been dabbling in it. She was at WrestleMania. You can't just not have collisions in wrestling matches. You don't get to just walk around and do nothing. They'll do that for people who are just there to show off their body. They've done that in the past, but they still inevitably end up getting into contact. The idea that Ronda was so concussed that she was unable to handle even sparring is so out of this world that it's insane. Now, I don't know her, obviously. I don't know her mental state at the time. But what do you do when you're so concussed that you might trip and fall and die? Because that's how concussed you would have to be, the way she's speaking. That if you get rocked by a jab, that means you're a bad fall away from brain bleeding and possibly death. And then you go into wrestling. Like, that's just not how it works. Ronda Rousey couldn't box. There used to be a video of her sparring, okay? Or shadow boxing. And the UFC erased it from the internet because you could do stuff like that last night. This was her boxing. This was her, I'm not even doing it justice. This was her shadow boxing. We all know this video. MMA fighters know, or MMA fans know this video of Ronda shadow boxing like this. It was wiped from the internet because she had a terrible boxing coach who said she was the best in the world. She never had to improve on anything. That's what happened. Everyone knows it. It's the same, like, when Hillary Clinton comes on or Biden comes on, they act like you don't understand what happened 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Or when activists come on, they say everything used to be so racist. There were no black people in movies in the 90s. This is what the problem is here. This is how Ronda's acting. Nobody remembers what happened in 2010 or 2011 when we all knew you couldn't box and everyone would accuse your coach of being terrible and that he didn't teach you the proper stuff. He just said, go out there and do this and you're amazing. Nobody can criticize you. Nobody remembers this. Ronda Rousey, people aren't picking on you. It's because you were good, but you weren't as good as the UFC said you were. You were really good. But they had to hide you for a while. They did. Everyone knows this. They had to hide you from extremely good fighters of the time. And when you fought them, you lost. When you lost to Holly, you lost to Amanda. Everybody was like, yes, that's pretty much what we knew was going to happen. But good on you, Ronda. You took the fights. It's fine if you retire now because it's not going to get any better than it was. The idea that she went, my brain couldn't handle it, but for some reason I can go and do professional wrestling. Like, what the hell is that? She's still in her late 30s, by the way. There are women who are fighting and have fought that at older ages. She could potentially come back. Your brain is fine for wrestling, but it's not fine for fighting. You could still come back. There's still time. There's still places. But no. Ronda Rousey, gigantic L. Good on Chris Cuomo for interviewing her. He kissed her ass a little bit. But, the gender brain gap is here specifically with Ronda, thinking that nobody remembers. And then to say Joe Rogan, this is the person you want to call out by name? Joe Rogan. The guy who's going to be, who would be there for you now. If you said, Joe, I want to come on your show and explain myself. It's probably because he would challenge her. That's probably why she doesn't want to do it.
Turn it up, Jordan.